The gavel fell like a death sentence in the living room. Maeve Johnson watched her daughter Lisa shuffle legal papers with trembling hands. 49 years of sacrifice reduced to black ink on white paper. The house she had scrubbed clean for decades suddenly felt foreign. Greg leaned back in her late husband's favorite armchair, smirking. His designer suit cost more than Maeve's monthly grocery budget. Lisa avoided eye contact, her voice barely a whisper. "Mom, the lawyer says you're not capable of handling finances anymore." Maeve's weathered hands gripped the kitchen towel she'd been holding. 27 years of raising Lisa as a single mother meant nothing. The smell of fresh cornbread still lingered from this morning's batch. She had baked it, hoping to soften whatever blow was coming. Greg cleared his throat, his voice dripping with false sympathy. "We found the perfect place for you, Maeve." The way he said her name felt like sandpaper against her soul. Shady Oaks nursing home brochures scattered across the coffee table. Pictures of smiling elderly faces mocked her from glossy pages. Lisa finally looked up, tears threatening to spill over. "It's for your own good, Mom." The words hit harder than any physical blow ever could. Maeve remembered rocking Lisa through countless fevers and nightmares. She remembered working 3 jobs to pay for Lisa's college tuition. The graduation photo on the mantel seemed to laugh at her. Greg stood up, his 6-foot frame towering over Maeve's small figure. "The van will be here at 8 tomorrow morning." His tone suggested the conversation was over. Decision final. Maeve's voice cracked when she finally found it. "This is my house." Greg exchanged a knowing look with Lisa. "Not anymore," he said, tapping the legal documents. The room spun slightly as reality crashed down on her. Her own daughter had signed her life away. That evening, Maeve sat in her bedroom, surrounded by cardboard boxes. 49 years of memories reduced to 2 small suitcases. She held Robert's old work shirt against her chest. Her husband's scent had long faded, but hope remained. Down the hallway, she could hear Greg and Lisa whispering. Their hushed tones carried excitement, not guilt. The grandfather clock in the living room chimed 11 times. Each chime felt like another nail in her coffin. Maeve pulled out the family photo from their last Christmas together. Robert's arm wrapped protectively around both his girls. If only he could see what Lisa had become. The morning arrived with cruel punctuality. The Shady Oaks van idled in the driveway like a hearse. Lisa helped load the suitcases, her movements mechanical and distant. No goodbye hug, no tears, just awkward shuffling of feet. Greg watched from the front porch, checking his expensive watch. The van driver, a kind-faced woman named Martha, offered gentle words. "It's going to be okay, honey." But nothing felt okay as they pulled away from Maple Street. Maeve watched her house shrink in the side mirror. The vegetable garden she'd tended for 15 years looked abandoned already. Greg was probably already planning where to put his oversized television. Room 237 at Shady Oaks smelled like disinfectant and broken dreams. The walls were beige, the furniture institutional and cold. Her roommate, Eleanor, was 92 and mostly slept. Maeve unpacked her few belongings with shaking hands. Robert's photo went on the nightstand beside the narrow bed. Dinner was served at 5:30 sharp in the communal dining room. Meatloaf and mashed potatoes that tasted like cardboard. The other residents ate in silence, eyes glazed with resignation. Maeve pushed food around her plate, appetite completely gone. That first night, she lay awake staring at water stains. The ceiling tiles seemed to mock her with their imperfection. Outside her window, she could see the parking lot's harsh fluorescent lights. Inside her chest, something harder than grief was taking root. Eleanor stirred in the next bed, muttering in her sleep. Maeve closed her eyes and made a silent promise. This would not be how her story ended. Morning brought another day of institutional routine. Breakfast at 7, medications at 9, activities at 11. The social worker, a perky 20-something named Jennifer, approached with clipboards. "Mrs. Johnson, We need to discuss your financial arrangements. Maeve nodded politely while fury simmered beneath the surface. She had raised a daughter who threw her away. She had loved a man who left her vulnerable. She had trusted people who saw her as disposable. But something deep inside refused to surrender. During lunch, she overheard two aides discussing the monthly costs. $3,000 just for basic care. Greg and Lisa were paying to warehouse her conscience. That afternoon, while other residents napped, Maeve made plans. She would not go quietly into this good night. Her weathered hands might shake, but her spirit remained unbroken. The cruel verdict had been delivered, but appeals were possible. Tomorrow, she would begin fighting back. Tonight, she would remember who she used to be. The woman who built a home with nothing but determination. The mother who sacrificed everything for an ungrateful child. The widow who survived when the world seemed impossible. That woman was still here, buried under layers of hurt. But pain could be fuel, and fuel could power engines. Maeve Johnson was about to discover just how powerful she could be. 3 days into nursing home hell, Maeve couldn't sleep again. Eleanor's snoring echoed through the sterile room like a broken radiator. The fluorescent lights in the hallway buzzed with electronic persistence. Maeve stared at the wooden chest Martha had smuggled in yesterday. The aide had whispered it was found in the house's basement. Greg must have missed it during his greedy treasure hunt. The chest sat on her nightstand like a time capsule. Robert's initials were carved deep into the weathered oak surface. She traced the letters with trembling fingers, remembering his calloused hands. 20 years since his heart attack, yet grief still ambushed her. The brass lock had long since broken, held shut by habit. Inside, yellowed photographs smiled up at decade-old memories. Robert in his work clothes, grinning beside construction equipment. Lisa as a toddler, chocolate cake smeared across chubby cheeks. Wedding photos from their courthouse ceremony in 1978. Beneath the pictures lay letters tied with faded blue ribbon. Love notes he'd written during their courtship made her chest ache. But underneath everything, an envelope marked, "For Maeve only waited." Her heart hammered against her ribs as she broke the seal. Robert's careful handwriting filled 3 pages of cream-colored stationery. "My dearest Maeve, if you're reading this, I'm already gone." Tears blurred her vision, but she forced herself to continue. "I never told you about the investments, the properties, the plans." The words seemed impossible, like reading someone else's fairy tale. Johnson Construction wasn't just about building houses for other people. Her breath caught as the truth unfolded in careful script. Every paycheck, I bought something small. A lot here, stocks there. Robert had been playing a 30-year game of financial chess. By the time you read this, it should be worth millions. Maeve's hand shook so violently she almost dropped the papers. "The downtown office building where Greg works belongs to us now." A laugh bubbled up from somewhere deep inside her chest. "The apartment complex on Riverside Drive is ours too, sweetheart." Page 2 revealed an empire, built brick by brick. Real estate stretching across 3 counties, all under shell companies. Stock portfolios managed by discreet investment firms downtown. Land purchased quietly through lawyers who kept Robert's secrets. "I wanted to surprise you on our 25th anniversary, Maeve." But cancer had stolen that dream before it could bloom. The final page contained the most stunning revelation of all. Lisa inherits everything only if she cares for you properly. Robert had anticipated his daughter's potential cruelty even then. "Love and respect, Maeve." Those were my exact words to the lawyer. The legal document attached confirmed every impossible detail. Margaret Johnson, sole beneficiary of the Johnson Family Trust. Assets totaling $4.7 million at last valuation. Maeve read the numbers 3 times before they seemed real. Her husband, the construction worker, was actually Robert the visionary. The man who packed bologna sandwiches owned downtown office towers. She pressed the papers against her chest and sobbed. Not from grief this time, but from overwhelming gratitude. Robert had known she might need protection someday. He'd built her armor disguised as ordinary working-class love. Dawn was breaking outside her nursing home window. Other residents shuffled past her door toward mandatory breakfast. But Maeve Johnson was no longer just another warehoused woman. She was the secret owner of half the city's commercial district. The woman they'd declared mentally incompetent controlled millions. Greg strutted around offices that belonged to his mother-in-law. Lisa lived in a house mortgaged by her mother's fortune. Maeve wiped her tears and studied her reflection carefully. Gray hair that had always seemed mousy now looked distinguished. Brown eyes that had appeared defeated suddenly sparkled with purpose. The woman staring back deserved respect, not nursing home exile. She thought about Greg's smug face during yesterday's phone call. He'd bragged about his promotion at Henderson Development Corporation. Little did he know Henderson was just another Johnson Trust subsidiary. Maeve could fire him with a single phone call. She imagined his shock when security escorted him out. The mental image brought her first genuine smile in weeks. Lisa would panic when Greg lost his precious salary. Their mortgage payments would become impossible within months. Then they'd discover who really owned their comfortable lifestyle. Maeve carefully folded Robert's letter back into its envelope. The wooden chest would stay here as her secret weapon. But the real battle was about to begin outside these walls. She'd spent 49 years being underestimated by everyone. People saw a quiet black woman and assumed she was powerless. Greg treated her like disposable furniture in his perfect house. Even Lisa had forgotten her mother was once fierce. But Robert had seen her strength when nobody else bothered looking. He trusted her with an empire built on construction worker wages. Now it was time to honor that faith. Maeve stood up and smoothed her simple cotton nightgown. Tomorrow, she would make some very interesting phone calls. The nursing home's financial office would receive payment in full. Then she'd arrange for private transportation to downtown law offices. Greg and Lisa thought they'd buried her alive in Shady Oaks. Instead, they'd just awakened a sleeping dragon. The meek widow was about to become a woman of power. And power, Maeve realized, was the sweetest revenge of all. Robert's voice whispered through the morning light streaming in. "Rise up, sweetheart. It's time to claim what's yours." Maeve Johnson smiled and began planning her resurrection. Greg Henderson straightened his Italian silk tie and admired his reflection. Corner office on the 15th floor with panoramic city views. Mahogany desk inherited from the previous executive who mysteriously resigned. Life was finally unfolding exactly according to his master plan. He dumped the deadweight mother-in-law into institutional storage. Now Lisa's inheritance would flow directly through his capable hands. The intercom buzzed with his secretary's nervous voice. "Mr. Henderson, there's an emergency board meeting in 5 minutes." Greg frowned but grabbed his leather portfolio anyway. Emergency meetings usually meant someone was getting promoted. Down the hall, Lisa sat in their kitchen counting money. The nursing home bill had arrived yesterday. $3,000. A small price for purchasing freedom from maternal obligations. She tried ignoring the guilt gnawing at her stomach. Mom had sacrificed everything for this ungrateful daughter's future. But Greg promised wealth beyond Lisa's wildest childhood dreams. He'd shown her spreadsheets, projections, 5-year financial plans. Soon they'd own multiple properties across the entire metro area. The phone rang, interrupting her uncomfortable moral inventory. "Baby, something weird is happening at the office today." Greg's voice carried an edge she'd never heard before. "What kind of weird?" Lisa asked, suddenly feeling uneasy. "Board meeting out of nowhere. Nobody knows what's going on." Meanwhile, across town, Maeve adjusted her navy blue blazer. The lawyer had suggested professional attire for today's corporate debut. She'd purchased the outfit yesterday with Robert's credit card. 40 years of thrift store shopping felt like ancient history. The hired car pulled up to Henderson Development Corporation's entrance. Glass towers reflected clouds, like mirrors against the sky. Robert had owned this building since 1997. Greg strutted through lobbies that belonged to his mother-in-law. Maeve's heels clicked against polished marble as she entered. Security guards nodded respectfully at the building's actual owner. The elevator rose smoothly to the 15th floor boardroom. Through glass doors, she could see Greg pacing nervously. 12 executives sat around an oval conference table. Charts and graphs covered walls like expensive wallpaper. Maeve paused outside, savoring this moment of perfect anticipation. The secretary announced her arrival with professional courtesy. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Margaret Johnson." Greg's head snapped up, confusion replacing his usual smugness. "What the hell is she doing here?" he whispered. The lead attorney, Mr. Patterson, stood to make introductions. Mrs. Johnson owns 42% of Henderson Development Corporation. Silence fell like a theater curtain across the room. Greg's face drained of color, then flushed deep red. "That's impossible. She's a nursing home patient." Maeve entered the boardroom with quiet dignity intact. Her presence commanded attention without demanding it. "Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for accommodating this meeting." She moved to the head of the table. Greg remained frozen in his chair, mouth hanging open. "Mr. Henderson, we need to discuss your employment status." The words hit him like physical blows to the chest. "Employment status? I'm the regional development manager here." Maeve smiled with grandmother, like sweetness that concealed steel underneath. "Not anymore, Greg. Consider this your official termination notice." The room erupted in whispers and shocked murmurs. Greg shot to his feet, knocking over his coffee cup. "You can't fire me. I have contracts, agreements, legal protections." Mr. Patterson slid documents across the polished table surface. "At-will employment, Mr. Henderson. Mrs. Johnson's decision is final." Maeve watched Greg's swagger crumble like a demolished building. The man who'd called her a burden now faced unemployment. "Security will escort you out within the next 10 minutes." Her voice remained calm while delivering the devastating blow. Greg's hands shook as he gathered his scattered papers. "This is insane. Lisa will never believe what you've done." Maeve tilted her head with motherly patience. Lisa is about to learn many surprising things about her mother. 2 security guards appeared at the boardroom entrance. Greg's Italian suit suddenly looked cheap under fluorescent lighting. "Mrs. Johnson, surely we can discuss this like reasonable adults." But Maeve had already turned her attention to other matters. "Mr. Patterson, please prepare the eviction notice for Maple Street." Greg's knees nearly buckled at this final revelation. The house he'd stolen belonged to the woman he'd discarded. "The mortgage payments are 3 months behind anyway," Maeve continued. She'd been monitoring their finances through her banking connections. Greg stumbled toward the door, flanked by uniformed security. His colleagues avoided eye contact, embarrassed by the spectacle. "You'll regret this, old woman. I'll sue you blind." Maeve's laugh sounded like wind chimes in spring breeze. "With what money, Greg? Your salary just disappeared." The elevator doors closed on his furious, desperate face. Through the boardroom windows, Maeve watched him exit the building. He stood on the sidewalk looking lost and completely defeated. His phone buzzed constantly as he called Lisa frantically. But the puppet master's strings had just been cut forever. Inside the boardroom, executives exchanged amazed glances. Nobody had expected this quiet revolution from a nursing home. "Mrs. Johnson, what are your plans for the company now?" Maeve straightened her blazer and smiled with genuine warmth. "We're going to build something beautiful, something that helps people." She thought about Robert watching from wherever souls gather. He'd given her the tools to reclaim her stolen dignity. Now she'd use them to become the woman she'd always been. The nursing home could wait another day or two. Today was for watching Greg's empire crumble into dust. Tomorrow would bring even sweeter revenge against ungrateful children. Maeve Johnson had just fired the first shot in a war, and she was finally fighting from a position of strength. The hired car pulled into the driveway at exactly 3:15. Maeve had timed her arrival for maximum psychological impact. Greg would be home from his humiliating corporate expulsion. Lisa would be processing the shocking phone calls and messages. The house looked exactly the same as yesterday morning. White picket fence, rose bushes, manicured lawn stretching toward sidewalks. But everything had changed in ways they couldn't yet comprehend. Maeve walked up the front steps she'd swept countless times. Her key still fit the lock perfectly. Through the living room window, she could see them arguing. Greg paced like a caged animal, gesturing wildly with his hands. Lisa sat on the sofa, pregnant belly prominent beneath her dress. Maeve knocked firmly on her own front door. The arguing stopped immediately, replaced by suffocating silence. Footsteps approached slowly, hesitantly, filled with growing dread. Greg opened the door, his face twisted with barely controlled rage. "What the hell do you want now, you crazy woman?" Maeve smiled with the patience of someone holding all cards. "I want to discuss your living arrangements, Greg." She pushed past him into the familiar warmth of home. The scent of Lisa's vanilla candles still lingered everywhere. Family photos lined the mantel, mocking yesterday's cruel betrayal. Lisa remained frozen on the sofa, tears streaming down cheeks. "Mom, I don't understand what's happening to our family." Maeve's heart clenched at her daughter's broken voice. But Robert's letter had steeled her resolve against manipulation. "Nothing is happening to our family, sweetheart. Something's happening to Greg." She pulled documents from her leather purse with deliberate slowness. Property deeds, mortgage papers, lease agreements filled her hands. "This house belongs to the Johnson Family Trust, Lisa." Greg snatched the papers, scanning them with growing horror. "This is impossible. We've been paying the mortgage for years." Maeve settled into Robert's old recliner with regal composure. "You've been paying rent to my property management company." The truth hit Greg like a physical blow to his stomach. Every monthly payment had been deposited into Maeve's accounts. "The lease expires at midnight tonight," she continued calmly. Lisa's sobbing intensified as reality crashed down around them. "Mom, please. We have nowhere else to go right now." Maeve studied her daughter's swollen belly and tear-stained face. 27 years of unconditional love warred with recent betrayal. "You should have considered that before declaring me mentally incompetent." Greg threw the papers across the coffee table violently. "This is all fake. You're a broke nursing home patient." Maeve reached for her phone and dialed her lawyer. "Mr. Patterson, please send the eviction team to Maple Street." Greg's face turned purple with impotent rage and disbelief. "You can't evict us. Lisa's pregnant. There are laws protecting tenants." Maeve's laugh sounded like breaking glass in the tense room. "Those laws protect tenants who pay rent on time." She displayed her phone screen, showing 3 months of missed payments. "You've been living here for free, while warehousing your landlord." Lisa struggled to her feet, belly leading her unsteady movements. "Mom, I'm sorry. I made a terrible mistake trusting Greg." For a moment, Maeve's resolve wavered at her daughter's desperation. But Robert's voice whispered warnings about manipulation and empty promises. "Sorry doesn't undo 3 days of nursing home hell, Lisa." Greg stepped between mother and daughter like a cornered animal. "Don't listen to her lies, baby. She's obviously having psychotic episodes." Maeve stood slowly, drawing herself to her full height. "The only psychotic thing here is your greed, Greg Henderson." She moved toward the front door with measured, deliberate steps. "You have until midnight to remove your personal belongings." Greg's voice cracked with desperation and mounting panic. "Wait. Let's discuss this like rational adults here." Maeve paused in the doorway, silhouetted against afternoon sunlight. Rational adults don't steal houses from their mothers-in-law. The door closed behind her with soft, final authority. Inside, Lisa collapsed back onto the sofa in tears. Greg kicked the coffee table, sending magazines flying everywhere. "This is insane. She's completely lost her mind somehow." But Lisa was beginning to see truth through Greg's lies. Her mother had never been crazy or incompetent. She'd been quietly planning this elegant revenge for days. Greg, what if she really owns all these properties? His face contorted with fury at the suggestion. Don't be stupid. She's a nobody from nowhere. Lisa flinched at the venom in his voice. The same tone he'd used describing her mother yesterday. Outside on the front porch, she could see Maeve waiting. Her mother sat on the porch swing Robert had built. Evening shadows stretched across the yard like dark fingers. Maeve looked peaceful, almost serene in her vindication. Lisa pressed her hand against her growing belly. What kind of world was she bringing this baby into? A world where daughters betrayed mothers for money. A world where greed poisoned even family love. Greg stormed upstairs to pack his expensive suits. His curses echoed through rooms that no longer welcomed him. Lisa remained on the sofa, wrestling with crushing guilt. 3 months ago, life had seemed so simple and promising. Now everything lay in ruins around her swollen feet. Through the window, she watched her mother rocking gently. Maeve's lips moved as if speaking to invisible companions. Probably talking to Dad, asking for forgiveness or guidance. Lisa's tears fell harder as the baby kicked restlessly. Even her unborn child seemed to sense the family chaos. At 11:30, a moving truck arrived at the curb. Greg loaded boxes with violent, jerky movements. His dreams of easy wealth disappeared into cardboard containers. Lisa gathered baby clothes she'd optimistically purchased. The nursery they'd planned would never exist here. This house belonged to the woman they'd thrown away. Maeve remained on the porch swing until they left. She waved goodbye like a gracious hostess dismissing guests. The cruelty was survival, just as she'd told herself. But victory tasted bitter when family blood was spilled. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and difficult choices. Tonight, Maeve Johnson sat alone in her reclaimed home. The motel room on Route 34 smelled like stale cigarettes. Greg slammed the door so hard the mirror rattled. 2 beds, 1 bathroom, and a broken air conditioning unit. This was their new reality after losing everything overnight. Lisa sat heavily on the polyester bedspread, exhausted beyond measure. Her baby bump had grown more pronounced over recent weeks. The pregnancy was becoming harder to hide from neighbors. Greg paced the narrow space between beds like a predator. "This is all temporary," he muttered for the 100th time. His unemployment benefits wouldn't cover motel expenses much longer. Lisa pressed her hand against her aching lower back. "Maybe we should find a cheaper place to live." Greg whirled around, eyes blazing with misdirected anger and frustration. "Cheaper? We shouldn't be paying anything at all, Lisa." He pulled legal documents from his battered briefcase. "Your crazy mother stole what rightfully belongs to us." Lisa had been thinking about her mother's words constantly. Every insult Greg hurled revealed his true character more clearly. "She didn't steal anything, Greg. Dad left everything to her." His face darkened at her unexpected defiance. "Don't tell me you're starting to believe her lies." Lisa stood slowly, hands protecting her growing belly instinctively. "They weren't lies, were they? She really owns those properties." Greg's jaw clenched as his careful facade finally cracked. "So what if she does? You're her only child." The greed in his voice made Lisa's stomach turn. "That doesn't mean we're entitled to steal from her." Greg moved closer, his presence suddenly feeling threatening and dangerous. "We didn't steal anything. We followed proper legal procedures." Lisa backed toward the bathroom door, sensing escalating danger. "We had her declared mentally incompetent when she wasn't." Greg's hands balled into fists at his sides. "She's just an old woman who got lucky somehow." His dismissive tone reminded Lisa of yesterday's nursing home visit. How he'd spoken about her mother like discarded furniture. "She raised me by herself after Dad died, Greg." Tears started flowing as guilt overwhelmed her defensive barriers. "I threw away the woman who sacrificed everything for me." Greg grabbed her shoulders, fingers digging into soft flesh. Stop talking like that. She manipulated you your whole life. Lisa tried pulling away, but his grip tightened painfully. You're hurting me, Greg. Let go of my arms. His eyes held a coldness she'd never seen before. You need to sign these papers transferring your inheritance rights. Lisa stared at the documents in his other hand. Legal papers that would give Greg control over everything. I'm not signing anything until we talk to lawyers. Greg's face contorted with rage at her continued resistance. You'll sign them now or we're finished, Lisa. The threat hung in the air like poisonous smoke. Lisa realized she was seeing Greg's true nature clearly. Maybe we should be finished then. His hand struck her cheek before she could react. The slap sent her stumbling backward into the bathroom door frame. Pain exploded through her skull as she hit concrete. Greg stood over her, breathing hard, knuckles still clenched. You'll do what I tell you, when I tell you. Lisa touched her cheek, feeling blood from a split lip. Her baby kicked frantically, responding to maternal stress hormones. Terror flooded through her as Greg raised his hand again. Greg, please. Think about the baby we're having together. He grabbed her arm and yanked her roughly upright. The baby that's going to inherit millions from Grandma. Lisa saw everything clearly for the first time in months. Greg had never loved her, only her potential inheritance. She was just a tool for accessing her mother's wealth. Let go of me right now, Greg. He shoved her hard against the bathroom door instead. Lisa's belly hit the doorknob, sending sharp pain everywhere. She doubled over, gasping, hands protecting her precious cargo. The baby, she whispered, panic rising in her throat. Greg showed no concern for his unborn child's safety. Sign the papers, Lisa. This ends when you cooperate. Lisa looked up at the man she'd thought she loved. His face showed no remorse, only calculated, cold determination. This was the person she'd chosen over her mother. Pain cramped through her abdomen like lightning strikes. Something's wrong with the baby, Greg. I need a hospital. He stepped back, suddenly realizing what he'd done. You're fine. You're just being dramatic like always. But blood was seeping through Lisa's maternity pants. She pulled herself upright using the bathroom sink. I'm leaving, Greg. This marriage is over completely. Her voice shook but carried newfound steel underneath. Greg blocked the motel room door with his body. You're not going anywhere until we settle this. Lisa grabbed her purse and pushed past him forcefully. Touch me again and I'll call the police immediately. Outside, rain fell like tears from a grieving sky. Lisa's hands shook as she dialed her mother's number. 3 rings. Then Maeve's familiar voice answered gently. Mom, I was wrong. I'm so sorry for everything. Silence stretched across the phone connection for heartbeats. Where are you, sweetheart? Are you hurt or injured? Lisa sobbed into the phone, words tumbling out desperately. Greg hit me, Mom. I think something's wrong with baby. I'm coming to get you right now, Lisa. 20 minutes later, Maeve's hired car pulled into the parking lot. Lisa ran toward her mother despite the stabbing abdominal pain. She fell to her knees on wet asphalt. Mom, please forgive me for everything I've done to you. Maeve knelt beside her daughter, gathering her close. You're still my baby, Lisa. We'll fight this together. Rain mixed with tears as they held each other. Behind them, Greg watched from the motel window. His meal ticket was walking away forever. But Lisa was finally coming home to safety. 6 months after the motel confrontation, Lisa delivered a healthy daughter. Baby Grace slept peacefully in her grandmother's arms every night. The divorce proceedings had been swift once police documented Greg's violence. But Greg Henderson refused to accept his complete defeat gracefully. He'd spent his unemployment benefits on a hungry personal injury lawyer. The lawsuit accused Maeve of elder abuse and financial manipulation. She destroyed my family through vindictive use of inherited wealth. Greg's legal papers painted him as the victim of circumstances. A hard-working family man crushed by a bitter old woman. The media picked up the story with sensational headlines everywhere. Nursing home patient reveals hidden fortune, destroys son-in-law's life. Local news trucks parked outside Maeve's house for weeks. Reporters shouted questions about her sudden transformation into a mogul. Lisa shielded baby Grace from camera flashes and intrusive questions. "Mom, maybe we should settle out of court somehow." But Maeve's jaw was set with the determination of years. "Some battles need to be fought in the light, sweetheart." She'd hired the city's most respected civil rights attorney. Sarah Chen had built her reputation defending the underestimated. "Mrs. Johnson, we have a very strong case here." The evidence was overwhelming in Maeve's favor completely. Robert's will was ironclad, witnessed by 3 independent parties. The trust documents predated Greg's marriage to Lisa entirely. Every property transaction had been properly recorded and documented. "Greg's lawyers are fishing in empty waters," Sarah explained confidently. The courthouse steps buzzed with reporters and curious onlookers. September morning air carried the scent of approaching autumn. Maeve wore her navy blazer and Robert's wedding ring. Lisa walked beside her. Grace nestled against her chest. 3 generations of Johnson women entering the legal battlefield. Inside, the courtroom was packed beyond normal capacity. Greg sat at the plaintiff's table in his only remaining suit. His lawyer, Marcus Briggs, looked uncomfortable with the evidence. $20,000 in fees for a case they couldn't win. Maeve's legal team exuded quiet confidence and thorough preparation. The gallery buzzed with whispered speculation and nervous energy. "All rise for the Honorable Judge William Harris." Maeve's head snapped up at the familiar name being announced. A tall black man in judicial robes entered with dignity. Her heart skipped as recognition flooded through her memory. 23 years ago, she'd worked as a hotel housekeeper. Young William Harris had been a struggling law school graduate. His student loans were drowning him in impossible debt. Maeve had found him crying in the hotel lobby. His briefcase was repossessed, his apartment facing eviction proceedings. She'd quietly paid his rent for 6 months straight. Never asked for recognition, just helped because she could. William had become a successful attorney, then a judge. Their eyes met across the crowded courtroom now. Professional composure masked the flood of mutual recognition and gratitude. "This court will hear Henderson versus Johnson," he announced formally. Greg's lawyer stood to present his opening statement confidently. "Your Honor, my client was systematically destroyed by vindictive manipulation." Briggs painted Maeve as a calculating woman who'd hidden wealth. She allowed her family to believe she was helpless. The narrative portrayed Greg as an innocent victim of deception. "Mrs. Johnson used her financial power to destroy my client's career." Sarah Chen rose with the grace of a seasoned warrior. "Your Honor, the plaintiff is a domestic abuser seeking unearned wealth." She laid out Robert's will with surgical precision and clarity. "Mr. Henderson married into this family with predatory financial intentions." The evidence mounted like bricks in an unshakable wall. Bank records showing Greg's gambling debts and credit card abuse. Police reports documenting his assault on pregnant Lisa. Hospital records from Lisa's emergency room visit that night. The defendant protected herself from a man who stole her home. Greg squirmed in his chair as the truth emerged. His financial history revealed a pattern of exploitation and manipulation. Previous girlfriends who'd mysteriously lost money after dating him. Credit cards opened in elderly relatives' names without permission. "Mrs. Johnson is the victim here, not Mr. Henderson." Judge Harris listened with impartial attention to both sides. But his eyes occasionally found Maeve's face in the gallery. The woman who'd saved his career sat watching justice unfold. Greg was called to testify in his own defense. His arrogance returned as he approached the witness stand. "I loved Lisa and wanted to provide for our family." But cross-examination revealed his true character under oath. "Mr. Henderson, when did you first learn about the trust?" His answer contradicted 3 previous statements he'd made. And you forced Mrs. Johnson into a nursing home, why? Greg's composure cracked under Sarah's relentless questioning. She was becoming a burden on our household resources. The courtroom murmured at his callous choice of words. A burden worth $4.7 million? Greg's face flushed red as the numbers were spoken. Lisa took the stand with baby Grace, sleeping peacefully. Her testimony was devastating to Greg's remaining credibility. He hit me when I refused to sign inheritance papers. The domestic violence photos were entered into evidence carefully. Bruises on her face, medical reports about pregnancy complications. I chose my husband over my mother and nearly lost everything. Tears flowed as she described the motel room assault. My mother saved me from a man I thought loved me. Judge Harris called for a 30-minute recess suddenly. In the hallway, he approached Maeve with careful discretion. Mrs. Johnson, you probably don't remember me from years ago. Maeve smiled with the warmth that had saved him. William Harris, room 214, at the Riverside Hotel. His professional composure nearly cracked at her memory. You saved my life when I had nothing left. They spoke quietly while reporters circled like hungry sharks. I'll recuse myself if you think it's necessary, Mrs. Johnson. Maeve shook her head with absolute certainty and conviction. Judge this case on its merits, Your Honor. Back inside, the verdict was swift and decisive. The court finds no merit in the plaintiff's claims. Greg's face went white as his last hope died. Furthermore, Mr. Henderson will pay all court costs and fees. Justice had been served with perfect poetic symmetry. The afternoon session resumed with Marcus Briggs looking increasingly desperate. Greg's lawyer had run out of credible arguments and believable witnesses. Every document supported Maeve's legitimate ownership of the properties. Every witness confirmed Greg's pattern of financial manipulation and abuse. But Briggs wasn't ready to surrender his expensive retainer fee. Your Honor, I'd like to call Mrs. Johnson to testify. Sarah Chen objected immediately to the surprise witness request. The defense wasn't notified of this intention to examine Mrs. Johnson. Judge Harris sustained the objection with firm judicial authority. Mr. Briggs, you cannot ambush witnesses without proper notice. Greg whispered furiously into his lawyer's ear at the table. His face had grown increasingly red throughout the proceedings. Your Honor, my client requests permission to represent himself briefly. Sarah Chen stood again, alarm evident in her voice. Objection. The plaintiff cannot change representation mid-trial without cause. But Greg was already rising from his chair unsteadily. I don't need a lawyer to speak the truth here. Judge Harris frowned at the irregular courtroom behavior developing. Mr. Henderson, please sit down and let your attorney proceed. Greg ignored the direct order from the bench completely. This whole trial is a joke orchestrated by that woman. He pointed an accusing finger directly at Maeve's calm face. She's been planning this revenge for years behind our backs. The courtroom erupted in whispers, as Greg's composure finally shattered. Lisa clutched baby Grace tighter, sensing the approaching storm. Mr. Henderson, you are in contempt of this court's authority. But Greg was beyond caring about judicial protocol or consequences. Lisa, tell them the truth about your manipulative mother finally. His voice carried desperation mixed with mounting rage and hysteria. Lisa remained silent, tears streaming down her cheeks steadily. Answer me, Lisa. Don't let her control you anymore. Judge Harris reached for his gavel with growing impatience. Mr. Henderson, sit down immediately or face additional charges. Greg spun toward his ex-wife with wild eyes blazing. You were nothing but my puppet until she poisoned you. The courtroom gasped collectively at his explosive public confession. Lisa's sob echoed through the suddenly silent chamber around them. I controlled every decision you made for 3 years straight. Greg's mask had completely fallen away, revealing his true nature. You signed whatever I told you to sign back then. Sarah Chen was furiously taking notes of his spontaneous confession. The house, the nursing home, the mental incompetence papers. Each admission was another nail in Greg's legal coffin. None of it would have happened without my careful planning. Judge Harris slammed his gavel with thunderous authority, echoing everywhere. Mr. Henderson, you are hereby found in contempt of court. But Greg wasn't finished destroying himself with his own words. I should have gotten that inheritance money rightfully due to me. The courtroom watched in stunned silence as he imploded completely. Lisa was just a means to an end for accessing wealth. His lawyer was frantically gesturing for Greg to stop talking. That old woman had no right to interfere with my plans. Security guards moved toward the plaintiff's table with measured steps. Your Honor, I request immediate criminal charges be filed. Sarah Chen's voice cut through the chaos with professional precision. Mr. Henderson has just confessed to fraud, elder abuse, and conspiracy. Judge Harris nodded gravely at the prosecutor in the gallery. The district attorney will review today's transcript for criminal charges. Greg finally realized the magnitude of his courtroom breakdown. Wait, I didn't mean any of those statements just now. But court reporters had captured every damaging word spoken. Your Honor, I request a mistrial based on emotional distress. Judge Harris's expression showed no sympathy for Greg's desperate plea. Motion denied. This court has heard sufficient evidence for judgment. The security guards reached Greg's table as he continued protesting. Furthermore, the plaintiff's claims are entirely without merit or basis. Judge Harris's voice carried the weight of absolute judicial authority. Mr. Henderson is ordered to pay all court costs and fees. Greg's knees buckled as the financial reality hit him. Additionally, a restraining order prohibits contact with the Johnson family. The gavel fell with finality that echoed through the chamber. This court awards attorney fees to the defendant's legal team. Greg was led away in handcuffs, still shouting empty threats. This isn't over. I'll appeal to every court in America. But his voice faded as the courtroom doors closed. Maeve sat in stunned silence as victory settled around her. 23 years of widowhood had led to this moment. Robert's love had protected her even from the grave. Lisa approached her mother with baby Grace, sleeping peacefully. Mom, I'm so sorry for everything I put you through. Maeve stood and embraced her daughter with trembling arms. We won, Lisa. Not for money, but for our dignity. The courtroom slowly emptied as reporters rushed for their deadlines. Judge Harris approached the defense table with quiet dignity. Mrs. Johnson, justice was served here today completely. Maeve smiled at the man she'd helped decades earlier. Thank you, Your Honor, for judging fairly despite our history. He nodded with professional respect mixed with personal gratitude. Kindness always finds its way back to those who give it. Outside on the courthouse steps, autumn air felt crisp. Lisa adjusted Grace's blanket against the cooling evening breeze. What happens now, Mom? Where do we go from here? Maeve looked at her daughter and granddaughter with pure love. We go home, sweetheart. We build something beautiful together. The media circus was already moving on to tomorrow's scandals. But for the Johnson women, healing could finally begin. 3 generations walking toward a future built on truth. The burden was lifted. The dignity restored. The family healed. Maeve Johnson had won more than a legal victory. She'd reclaimed her place as the family's beating heart. And Grace would grow up knowing her grandmother's strength. The circle of love was unbroken, despite temporary betrayals. Home was waiting with open arms for all of them. 5 golden years had transformed the Johnson house back into home. Laughter echoed through rooms that once held only bitter silence. The kitchen smelled like fresh cornbread and chocolate chip cookies. Little Grace's artwork covered the refrigerator with rainbow fingerprints everywhere. Maeve sat on the front porch swing Robert had built. Her granddaughter curled against her side, listening to bedtime stories. Tell me about great-grandpa Robert again, Grandma Maeve. The 5-year-old's eyes sparkled with inherited curiosity and intelligence. He was a man who built dreams with his hands. Maeve's voice carried warmth earned through decades of love. Grace traced patterns on her grandmother's weathered palms gently. Mama says he left us treasure like a pirate. Maeve chuckled at her daughter's simplified explanation of inheritance. Better than treasure, sweetheart. He left us each other. Inside the house, Lisa prepared dinner for 3 generations. She'd grown stronger during these years of rebuilding her life. The scared woman who'd fled that motel room was gone. In her place stood a confident single mother and businesswoman. The divorce had been final within 6 months of Greg's arrest. His conviction for elder abuse had sealed his fate permanently. 2 years in state prison, 5 years probation afterward. Lisa had never visited him, never answered his letters. Some bridges deserved to burn completely to ash and memory. The screen door creaked as Lisa joined them on porch. Dinner's ready when you two are finished with story time. Grace jumped up with the boundless energy of childhood. Can we eat on the porch tonight like a picnic? 3 generations shared meals under stars whenever weather permitted. The dining room table felt too formal for their healing. Outside meant freedom, fresh air, and Robert's protective presence. Of course, baby girl. Go wash your hands first. Grace skipped inside, humming songs she'd learned at kindergarten. Lisa settled beside her mother on the comfortable swing. The foundation's opening ceremony is tomorrow morning, Mom. They'd spent 2 years planning the Dignity House Foundation, a shelter and support center for elderly women facing abuse. The building had been Robert's old construction company headquarters. Maeve had renovated it into something beautiful and purposeful. Are you nervous about speaking to all those people? Lisa squeezed her mother's hand with gentle encouragement and support. I've been practicing my speech for weeks in the mirror. Maeve had never been comfortable with public speaking before. But this message needed her voice, her experience, her truth. 20 women will have safe beds tomorrow night because of us. The first residents would move in after the ribbon cutting. Women who'd been discarded, manipulated, declared burdens by family. Each story echoed Maeve's own journey through darkness toward light. I'm proud of you, Mom. You turned pain into purpose. Lisa's voice carried admiration mixed with lingering guilt and gratitude. Some wounds had healed completely, others left tender scars. But forgiveness had bloomed in the space between mother and daughter. Grace returned with clean hands and an enormous appetite. They arranged TV trays on the porch like outdoor royalty. Fried chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans from Maeve's garden. Simple food that tasted like love and second chances. Grandma, why do sad ladies need a special house? Children asked questions that pierced straight to the heart. Maeve chose her words carefully for innocent 5-year-old ears. Sometimes people forget how to be kind to older ladies. Grace nodded with the wisdom of someone raised on unconditional love. Like when mean Greg was bad to you and Mama? Even years later, Greg's shadow occasionally touched their conversations. But Grace knew him only as a cautionary tale. Yes, sweetheart. But we learned that families can heal. The evening air carried the scent of honeysuckle and hope. Fireflies began their nightly dance across the front yard. Grace chased them with mason jars, giggling at each catch. Mom, do you ever wonder what would have happened? Lisa's voice trailed off, but Maeve understood the unfinished question. What if Robert had never left the secret will behind? What if Greg had succeeded in stealing everything valuable? What if they'd never found their way back to forgiveness? I think Robert knew we'd need each other eventually. Maeve watched her granddaughter collecting tiny lights in jars. He protected us, even when we couldn't protect ourselves. The next morning arrived with September sunshine and nervous energy. Television crews gathered outside the renovated foundation building downtown. Local politicians posed for photographs with generous donation checks. But the real guests were 20 elderly women seeking shelter. Their faces told stories of survival, betrayal, and guarded hope. Maeve stood at the podium, hands trembling slightly with emotion. 5 years ago, I lived in a nursing home. Her voice carried across the assembled crowd with growing strength. My own family had declared me a burden worth discarding. Murmurs of sympathy rippled through the gathered audience members. But kindness always finds its way back to those who give it. She looked directly at Judge Harris in the front row. And it's never too late to stand up for your dignity. The crowd erupted in applause that lasted several minutes. Lisa wiped tears from her cheeks as her mother concluded. This foundation will remind the world that elderly women matter. Grace clapped enthusiastically from her front row seat beside Lisa. That love is stronger than greed, always and forever. Maeve cut the ceremonial ribbon with hands that no longer shook. The Dignity House Foundation opened its doors to healing. 20 women would sleep safely tonight in beds of respect. Later that evening, 3 generations sat on their porch again. Grace had fallen asleep between grandmother and mother, naturally. The setting sun painted everything in golden light and shadow. We did something good today, didn't we, Mom? Lisa's voice carried wonder at their transformed family dynamic. We turned our pain into someone else's protection and hope. Maeve rocked gently, holding 2 of her greatest treasures close. Robert's dream had grown beyond his wildest construction worker imagination. His love had built an empire that sheltered hearts. The burden had become a blessing through the alchemy of time. And the Johnson women would never be powerless again.